So the dedication is really interesting because he doesn't just dedicate it to one person. He says this book is dedicated to the memory of any moment you have loved or been in love, and the people who have lived in that moment with you. For my mother, for the changing city I once knew, and for the one I still love. For Tyler, for Mike, for the barbershop, for Gina Balrock, for Marshawn McCarroll, for anyone you miss. That was a beautiful dedication, and I think it's one that we can all relate to. We all miss something, whether it's our childhood or a person or a love or an idea or probably even who we used to be or who we want to be at some point. I think we all can relate to missing something or someone or a memory. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Poets Corner. I'm Anna, and today I'm so excited to be doing this book talk. This poetry book is one of my favorite poetry books that I have read so far. It is fantastic, and I cannot wait to start talking about it. So, a little bit about this book. It is called The Crown Ain't Worth Much by Hanif Willis Abdurakib. And it is done by Button Poetry. I don't know if you guys know a lot about Button Poetry, but I know a lot about it from YouTube, which I watch a ton of Button Poetry videos, and their artists are amazing. And so for this to be a print version of one poet's work is it's awesome. At least for me. I loved reading this, and I've been reading it again because it is just so amazing. It is quite long, and the poems are quite meaty and heavy, and so it took me quite a while to read this book, but I have been waiting so long to do a book talk on this, and I cannot wait to get started. So there are 4 parts in this book, just Roman numeraled 1, 2, 3, and 4. There are a range of about 9 to 16 poems in each section, and there is an introductory poem in the front called On Hunger, which is, once I read it, I knew it was over for me. Like, I was just like, okay, I'm done. The writing is so amazing, and it's just so artistic, and yet so raw and real, and I really love it. And I know I'm going on and on and on about it, and I haven't really told you what the book is about, so let me do that. This book is mainly about the suffering of the African American community and one man's experience of living and growing up in a community where especially young boys and men had to sort of be on their guard all the time, or it was just a different life than what most people think of when they think of like maybe a childhood in America. It was not pretty, and it's a very sort of cautionary, eye-opening, sort of gritty story about this man's experience from childhood all the way into college and beyond, and how African Americans have suffered and have had to sort of grow up with this idea that there are certain things that they can't do because of the history and the stigma of racism in this country. And it has been such a heart-wrenching and tumultuous experience for me in reading that, because I feel like I've had a very sheltered life, and I haven't been on the receiving end of a lot of the racism that I know is prevalent in this country. And so reading about someone's experiences in the form of poetry, which of course gives him a much wider range of description and sort of articulation, has been sort of a eye-opener, and it really convicted me of not paying attention and maybe not caring as much as I definitely should have. And so I really enjoyed reading this. There are so many poems that I loved in this. I cannot pick a favorite, although I will say that the very first one, On Hunger, is the best way possible to introduce this book. It has been sort of just one scenario after the other. You get things from different points. There's a couple of poems in there that are written from the point of view of a barber who has been in one community for so long and has seen so many people come and go, and he is telling people, the people that whose hair he's cutting, the many things that he's seen in his lifetime. And it's a beautiful way of sharing history. A lot of times we think of history as just a book, you know, a history book that we've got to sit down and read. And this is the way I love to view history. It's not just a book, it's a community. It's people telling stories of how things used to be and how they are now and how they feel about that change. Because when you think about it, at least our generation, we're young and we're sort of getting used to the idea of change. Our whole lives are sort of based upon this change. In college, we have to get used to different schedules every semester because we don't know the classes we're taking. We don't know what days we're going to be taking it on. Our jobs may have to shift. We have to move away. You know, sometimes we transfer to different countries or different cities within the country. You know, we're so used to change. And back then, people got used to a specific way of living, a certain way of living, and for this change to come upon them like this, it's just a whole nother level of adaptation, and it's harder for them. And you know, sometimes even I don't consider that when I you know, say, oh, they're so slow, or you know, I don't understand what the big deal is, but it really is a shift for them. And so I really loved from that one point of view of the barber who's been in this community for so many years. I really loved hearing his history and how, you know, that store across the street, that's been there, and then somebody came in and took it, and now it's not there. And that might happen to my store. And you know, he's doing this all the while cutting some kid's hair and telling everyone in the barber shop, you know, his story. And he remembers people in the community who have grown up and now they're in his chairs as adults. It's a beautiful way of expressing history, and I really love that. Another really cool thing about this book, they have some poetry from the point of view of ghosts, ghosts of people in the community that have died or have been killed, and that was really eye-opening as well. It does not mince words on the police violence and the relationship between police and the African American community. And that has also been incredibly educational for me and sort of helping me see both points of view. And I would so recommend this book, guys. Please go pick it up and read it. This author is fantastic. And if there are any other books by him, know that I will find them and do book talks on them because I cannot go on enough about this book. Another really cool thing is the punctuation. There's no set rules for punctuation in poetry, and so a lot of times writing poems, you sort of think, I'll just stick a comma there or comma there, and a lot of these poems, though, they don't have any punctuation. And so I really love the idea that some poems don't have any punctuation because you can read them a million different ways, and every time that you do, they'll sound different, and I really like that. Sometimes it's like you have to figure out where the pauses are, where he starts a new thought, and yet it's so much more interactive because now I feel like I have to really think about it and I have to get into the author's mind a bit and figure out, like, what did he mean? Like, how did he want this to go? So that was really interesting. A lot of times he, instead of punctuation, he just separates the lines by slashes, which is another interesting way that I had never seen before reading this. I had never seen anyone write it like that, and so it also gives me ideas on ways that I can format my own poetry when I do decide to publish. There are also some poems that are written like sideways, which I found really interesting because I'm just reading along and then I'm like, do you know those like memes where it's like, you look really funny with your head looking that way? That was how I felt when I was reading that. It was just like, oh wait, hold on. Yeah, so those were really interesting. What I really also liked about this is a lot of poetry books that I've read, at least so far, it's been just like one tiny poem on a page, and it's really nice, and it's short, and they can be very powerful even in that small format. But sometimes it's like, it feels like poetry is just that, at least for me. And so reading this book, where very rarely do you find a very tiny poem on a page, it's like it takes up the whole page and the back of the page and several pages after. I really liked that. I know a lot of people, they find that to be a bit tedious to read, but I really liked that. And funny enough, it wasn't tedious to read. I found it very easy to read, but what slowed me down was like the content and how he worded certain things, and sort of just having to sit down after a while and just be like, okay, I need to stop, I need to take this in, I need to like process everything that's just happened, because it is so important, I think, to understand what the writer is trying to say. And I really didn't want to just whiz through this with sort of no purpose. And I really wanted to learn from this, and I really wanted to understand what he was saying and sort of feel where he was coming from as much as I could. There is language in this one. Definitely it does not distract you from the main issue. In fact, I feel like it actually helps get his message across. Another thing that I really liked, because it added so much culture, is that he writes in dialect. So the dialect, or the way that the community speaks, he writes just like that. And so it's like, as you're reading it, you hear that voice and you hear just the intonations and the pitch and the way they say words. It is perfect. I love that, because a lot of times if it's written just in the way that we are used to reading books every day, it kind of falls a bit flat, especially when you're trying to portray a certain culture. The dialect, the language of how they say things is probably one of the most important ways. It's the way that we know which culture we're talking about. And so I really enjoyed reading that and hearing like the voice and the words and the pitch and everything in my head, and not having to be like, okay, well, this is how they would say it. Like, no, this is how they are saying it. I really liked that as well. If you don't like history, read it. And if you do like history, read it, because I promise you, no matter what side of that line you're on, you're gonna learn something, and you're gonna love it, because there's no better way of learning history than through artists who have lived it themselves and portray it in such beautiful ways. I hope you enjoyed my book talk. If there's any comments that you have that you would love to discuss, please put them down in the comments below. Also, make sure to put some links of Hanif doing his spoken word poetry down in the bottom as well, because I really think you guys should go and check that out. And I'll see you next time.